Good morning, magical seekers. Brian here again with BMK Magic Explorations. This morning we're going to have a little discussion about Esbats. Now, the Sabbats, which are the Wheel of the Year festivals, or holidays you could say, were more or less based around the sun cycles. You see, our planet, besides spinning on its axis, also has its annual journey around the sun for 365 days of a year, according to the Gregorian calendar. And that's one reason why we have the 4 different seasons which change and all. And of course, that's why we have the 8 Sabbats on the Wheel of the Year, which celebrate these different time periods and things associated with them. Now, the Esbats, on the other hand, are, you could say a little bit simpler, but also a little bit more complex matter, but not too much. They are observations of the 13 yearly moon cycles. Yes, although we have 12 months, we get a full moon every 13 times every year. And the Esbats are observed on each full moon. One reason why I thought to do this video is because we have one coming up tonight. Each one of them generally has names that they're known by and all. I'm not going to go over all of them now, but this one for May is commonly known as the flower moon because it's we're like right around the last month of spring. It's where everything's in bloom and flowering. It's a very appropriate theme for this particular Esbat. Well, also from the Cree Native American tradition, I actually like this when I found out about this. They also know it as the frog moon, or would have, I guess still do, because it's a time period where frogs and toads are becoming much more active, both during the day and at night. Anyway, the moon goes through a 29-day cycle where it has different phases, where it's either waxing or waning. Besides full moon, usually falling directly after you have a new moon, which is, it still looks pretty much like a full moon, but it's not technically at that point. And there's these varying phases that it goes through, and including on the nights that we don't see it. The thing is, the sunlight reflecting off of it is what causes it to have its lunar light. And that's when we see it, when it's in our part, when it's reflecting off the part of the moon that we can see here on Earth, is how we get moonlight from it, and how we're observing the different phases. That's also basically the reason for the phases, because some parts of the moon are illuminated better, some aren't. And of course there's the other side of it, the dark side, which we don't see. Well, no sunlight reflecting off that side, so of course not. Anyway, commonly the Esbats are found within witchcraft traditions. Let's see, such as Wicca. I'm well aware that they're commonly observed by any number of the hereditary traditions or solitary practitioners, including solitary hereditary practitioners. It's a instead of being really, how you would say, big themed and everything, you can, based on like this one, the flower or frog moon, you can attach a theme to the particular Esbat if you like. Some covens, groups of witches who work together will do that. Of course, covens are, I've read, much more common of a thing over in Europe and some other places, whereas here in North America, I'm in East Texas, Nacogdoches, you do have some North American covens. It's become a little bit more common, but still you have more solitary practitioners like myself who are working on their own. And you could say observing and worshiping on their own. And anyway, a coven or individual solitary practitioner could, say, give it a theme for being flower moon or frog moon. Or you don't have to. It's oftentimes pretty freeform. There's no necessarily recommended or set way to observe it or practice. Uh, it's, like I said, more freeform. You just do with them what you want. Whereas the solar cycles on the wheel of the year with the big Sabbats, usually they're much more themed, and if you're going to observe them, it's much better to follow those. Though you can still do it individually how you would like to, or, just there with the big Sabbats, there's much more of older traditions and all to give a little bit of guideline, which should be at least kept in mind and observed somewhat. Though again, this is practice how you want. You don't have to do it that way. You don't have to observe it all. Me, I'm not the most devout and don't always. I'm not always paying attention or don't really bother like I should. Sometimes, you have other things going on in your life, and you just don't have as much time to be as devout as one would like. Anyway, again, with the Esbats, you can theme it, but you can also leave it totally freeform. Now, commonly with covens and all, with the Esbats, it's commonly the time, instead of the 8 times on the wheel of the year that would be gotten together and celebrated like big holidays, the Esbats being a monthly thing, it's more commonly a time where covens would get together and do, it'd be like the business meeting type of thing, then followed by some celebration and having some fun. It's more of a routine thing. Though still, it's got its own specialness to it. It's special in its own way or otherwise we wouldn't even have a name for it. Now, in terms of history and all for it, back during what we would know as the witchcraft trials back in Europe, also known in most neo-pagan communities as the burning times. Well, this was also during the time period of the Inquisition, and the main driving force behind it was the Catholic or Roman Catholic Church, and it was all about, fear, hysteria, and superstition on steroids, with people being afraid and all, and the church taking this and make out like there were witches everywhere and they were all servants who had made a pact with the devil. They literally believed that women and even some men would take their broomsticks, sometimes using a special ointment, and fly off into the wilderness to meet with the devil and literally dance and have sex with the devil and perform anti-Christian rituals and all. I mean, I'm not going to bash anybody else's religious beliefs, anything like that. I actually do. I kind of, like many others in my type of faith, hold it against the Catholic Church, but, not as much the modern day one as back then. They've never apologized for all this. But they also do have, a lot of, in their own practices and all, they have rituals and ceremonies and all, which they're not in their own context, but say a syncretic, eclectic, neo-pagan witch like myself were to do them, they might well be considered magical. I mean, a lot of magic can be found in ritual and ceremony, but it just depends on whether or not that's the context given for those doing it. So I do appreciate and like those things about Catholicism. But, I'm not crazy about them other ways. I mean, there's also been a lot of other horrific things that Catholicism has been responsible for throughout history. But anyway, it's pretty obvious back during the witchcraft trials period and burning times, that they had a rather vivid imagination and all. I mean, this was their way of blaming people for everything from crop failures to any other type of misfortune and all, instead of actually finding probably real witches. I mean, there more likely were those who would have counted, who did exist, but they were more or less getting people who were accusing each other, sometimes out of vendetta and all against their neighbors and such, or political reasons. I mean, the one thing I can say that came good out of this is, since usually the accused witches were tortured into confessing, which, yeah, if you're going to submit somebody to torture, unless you are what they wouldn't have been, some highly trained military or intelligence service personnel working for some government who's been trained to resist such, yeah, you're going to get a confession somebody being tortured is eventually going to confess and tell you what you want to try to get the torture to stop. Now that they may or may not realize that they were likely going to be executed, burned at the stake, hanged, drowned, whatever, for doing so, but you'd still confess to try to get the torture stopped. The average person would. But what I was getting at is one good thing that came out of it was, instead of things like this, that's one reason why commonly, at least in the Western world, we have a criminal justice system where you are regarded, if you're accused of a crime, as being innocent unless you are proven guilty. There are some places where it's actually backwards and you're considered guilty unless you're proven innocent, so. But still, in this case, you get a trial by your peers, or if you prefer, just by a judge, and can literally attempt to prove you have the presumption of innocence unless they can prove that you're guilty, so. It actually helped us out in terms of society, in terms of giving us a much more fair and all legal system. I'm not going to say it's entirely fair in every way, but at least they can't just accuse you of something and force you to confess by torturing you anymore. So anyway, that's kind of along the history of the Esbats. They just believed, that it was a thing that witches did every full moon or sometimes other nights, that they would take their broomsticks or whatever, maybe with a special magical ointment, and fly off to dance around, have sex, and perform anti-Christian rituals with the devil, which we'll get off more into the witchcraft trial period and the witchcraft trials period and the burning times more in depth in another video, but that's basically kind of the history of it. But there's not really a lot of evidence that any of this was actually happening beyond it being paranoid delusional hysteria by a pretty ignorant populace that didn't know how to explain misfortune, and it was a pretty weird and crazy time. Like I said, not that witches didn't really exist back then. You think about it, if they'd really got their hands on a magical witch back then, who actually had real power, she or he probably could have either slaughtered them all or just disappeared on them without them being able to do much about it. I mean, seriously, these days, you come at me with something like holy water or crucifix, I'm going to laugh at you and walk away. Or if you really want to push your luck and lay your hands on me, I might beat the tar out of you. Not to mention might curse or hex, but it would be out of defense in this case. Shows kind of how ignorant it all was. If they were dealing with the real deal, more than likely, they wouldn't have been doing anything to anyone. So no, it was more innocent people who were just victims of the hysteria. But anyway, the Esbats are, as I was saying, something that is observed every full moon and can be practiced freeform. The moon is important in many ways. Its own gravity that pulls back on the Earth is one reason why we have the tides in the oceans and seas. High tide, low tide. It's also, the full moon happens to have some interesting effect on animals and even on plants. It's said to have an interesting effect somewhat on a woman's menstrual cycle, which, much like the moon, has about a 29-day cycle, supposedly. It's a very powerful force, in nature, which pulls and pushes on many different things. So it's not hard to understand why there's an observance of it, and why it has an importance in some spiritual and religious practices, such as much of witchcraft. Now, I do have one recommendation link for you guys. A new preferred YouTuber I just added this morning, Mystery Witch School. Her name is Sandra, or Sandra, I'm not sure how she prefers to have it pronounced. And her video is quite a bit shorter than what mine looks like it's going to turn out to be, about half as long. I have a more roundabout way of going over a topic, and I've been told that some actually appreciate that. They appreciate my own more freeform way of doing this. It can seem kind of harebrained, but I'm a weird guy. Anyway, she goes over it in about half the time I do, and probably does a little bit better job. Okay, maybe I'm not that bad at this, but I do acknowledge there are others who are way better at this. Nobody's perfect. So I will leave you a recommendation and link to that. Well, at the same time, if you enjoy this channel's content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Please don't hesitate to leave any questions, comments, or suggestions down in the comment section below. And I hope that this channel and myself with this video and others have helped to bring a bit more magic into your lives. Take care, and hopefully I'll see everyone back here again in the next video.